at Duke. And it is looking at technologies for healthy, independent living for the aging, and I'll get into what that is. But this is coming from a research proposal that we've worked with and are getting more and more into it. And it's been interesting because of my own life, the things that happened to me. Most of you are aware of the fact that my wife Kay died in January, and she had a year. She was diagnosed in December of 2010, and so she went through 2011 really battling the disease. And she actually visited 5 foreign countries. I used to say 4 until I figured out that Puerto Rico, I guess, we could still classify as a foreign country. And she did dance to Puerto Rico and did 10 smooth dances and won the Top Woman's Award. And this is a woman with 6 months of life left. So it really says that it's important to understand what aging and what disease is all about. And I'm really proud of how she dealt with that and battled with that. And then the reason that you didn't hear me about 2 months ago or so was the fact that I had a little incident. I had a subarachnoid brain hemorrhage, which bled onto the brain. And that was an experience for me as well. And fortunately, I'm able to now still talk to you and have no side effects from that. But all of that has a huge impact on me, on my attitude towards aging and what's happening. So some of this is very personal in terms of the comment of what we're talking about. So the thing that makes this particularly significant are baby boomers. And baby boomers have saturated everything that they've touched, from starting to school, from kindergarten, from grade school, from high school, from college. The job market they saturated, economics, finances, all of that was saturated by the baby boomers. And the significant thing is the fact that in 2011, the baby boomers started being 65. And they represent, in 2011, 13% of the population, 40 million people out of a population of the U.S. of a little over 300 million people. This year, every 6 seconds, someone becomes 65 years old. So we really are increasing the number of them. And by 2030, over 65 will represent 19% of the population. 70 million people will be over age 65. And the significance of this is the age dependency ratio, which is one of the published figures for almost all countries. How many old people are there compared to how many young people, with the assumption that the young people take care of the old people. And that number is significantly changing. And so it'll be 35 to 1 in 2030. So there's a lot less people available to take care of us. So the challenge is if these over 65 saturate the healthcare market like they have saturated everything else, then the system, which is already broken, won't be able to accommodate that volume. And so there has to be some way of accommodating the saturation of the healthcare market. And this change that's taking place, and I'll talk more about it in a minute, is happening nationally now. So there's a major transition to, you get sick, you go see the doctor, of trying to engage you in your own health care. And that's what this is about, is really trying to get you to the position of where you're worried about what's happening to you. There have been other changes too. Tom just told me that he has one son who lives in Charlotte and one who lives in Irvine, California. And so the families are moving away, and increasingly the number of people that I talk to whose son or daughter lives on the other side of the United States or up north or someplace. So the old days of where you lived in the family house, and then the oldest son usually would inherit the house and take care of the old folks in the same house. And the Japanese, until recently, built their houses with that thought in mind, The new houses were built, and their parents would come live with them in the house. And again, personal experience is, I think I scared my kids during my little episode of where here I am by myself needing somebody to spend the night with me and the impact that had on their lives just doing that. So we've already beginning to talk about the fact we need a better solution than they're coming over and sleeping on my couch. I thought it wasn't any help because I couldn't wake them up. So that is a problem, though, because the old system isn't working. We need some way of doing this. But this statistic is if you reach age 65, the life expectancy is another 25 to another 40 years. And if you think about 0 to 40, and you got 65 to 105, what are you going to do? That's the change that really is going to take place. So how are you going to spend the years with that much time left? It's almost a lifetime in a sense that's remaining for you to do. And we need some way of dealing with that. Lots of issues related to that. So what's aging all about? Well, one of the things that I found difficult is what do I call these people? Retired, that's not necessarily a correct word. I'm sure not retired. And most of the people that I know aren't retired. Some are, some aren't. But we keep working, and so retired's not a good word for this. Elderly? I don't like that word. Mature? Maybe the men could handle that. Older adult? Senior citizen? Boy, I really don't like senior citizen. Kay would throw, I couldn't even have, what is it, modern maturity or something that the AARP? I now get 2 AARP cards about once a month now that I still throw away. I ought to be able to recycle that plastic, make a little money off of that. But, that's the kind of thing that we're talking about. Why do people age differently? Why do some people get old sooner than others? Is it what we do? Is it our genes? Is it what we've done? So I think that's an issue that's important to think about and understand what we really can do. But my favorite activity is aging. And so I like this research because every day of my life is a research day. So that's the part of the fun that we're talking about. So I still don't know the answer to my question, what to call us that are in this category. Who said what?
Interesting. Call us interesting.
Well, I like that, but I've always thought I've been interesting all along, Marge. Now, there is a poem by Oliver Wendell Holmes called The One Horse Sleigh. And the story is that they built a sled, of perfect material, perfect wood, perfect leather, perfect cloth, perfect everything. And once a year, they brought this sleigh. This is a poem that really is worth reading. They brought this sleigh out and drove it down the main street. And every year, it looked exactly brand new, the same as it did as when it was built. But on the 100th year, they drove it down the street and stopped it, and everything disintegrated at the same time. And so that has become a poem that's used by people that work with aging. So the ideal life on the vertical axis is a quality of life, and on the horizontal axis is your age. And so the perfect life is to have 100% quality of life and then die instantly. And a few people are lucky enough to come close to that. But in earlier years, this is what the life expectancy, and this is probably back in the 20s to the 30s, of where early illness and the life expectancy was in the 40s to 50s. Then we got a little bit better along, and the life expectancy was something like this. And what we're trying to do now is to push that curve up to try to get to the rectangle. So that's the goal of what we're doing. Incidentally, I might mention that there has been a lot of debate about the 125. The scientist says that 125 is your genetic maximum length of life. But there are people now that are beginning to question that, and with some genetic manipulation, with some understanding of what makes genes make you age, and manipulation of those, that number can go out to 140. Now, it's not clear to me why anybody would want to live to be 140. I'm not sure why anybody wants to live to be 105, but maybe so. I have a friend who will be 100 next year in informatics, and he started his 3rd book recently. And I thought that was pretty good. And he said, as long as the little marbles keep rolling around, I'm going to keep working. Now, physically, he's not as good, but mentally, he apparently is as sharp as ever. And I think it's like everything else. It's important to keep using both physical and mental capabilities to keep them in good shape. So that's where I am, I think, right now in my quality of life. It's still about 100% in spite of my episode. But Kay knew I was doing this kind of research, and throughout her illness of the last year, at least in 2010, we tracked her on this curve. And she stayed in the 80% or above until about the last week of her life, and she went to 40%, and then died. So I thought that was pretty close to as much as of that shape as you can get. I think I probably dipped a little bit whenever I had my little episode, but I think I'm back up now and still tracking with this. But one of the things that we're trying to do with this research is put people up to that particular point. So how do you define quality of life? So to me, it's what makes life worthwhile. And so what do I like to do that I couldn't do? And for Kay, it was travel and ballroom dancing. And she was able to really do that her last year of life. And I thought that was important to her in saying life is worth living. I've got another friend who actually now is dead, but his comment was the ability to read and understand the newspaper. Now, the newspaper, I don't think anybody really does much with it anymore, but I'd replace that perhaps with the internet and the computer, that part of that. But that was what was making him happy. So mobility wasn't an essential part of that. To me, it's the ability to communicate and enjoy friends. And I guess travel would be a piece of that for me as well. But different people, and I think it changes. So part of the research that we're going to do is to try to get people to evaluate their quality of life, a number between 0 and 100. What is your quality of life? And we're going to do this periodically. We don't know what, probably every quarter. But we also, are, for the people that are married, ask for their spouse to evaluate their partner as well as themselves or herself. I think it'll be interesting to see, because I would have probably evaluated Kay lower than she evaluated herself. But that was an important distinction, and that's why I think it's important to track that with the people. And again, I think the definitions will change over time, so this is something we want to continually monitor with what we're doing. So there is a community in Kannapolis. This is where Cone Mills used to be, and Cone Mills went overseas, and all those people were out of work. And there's a man whose name is Murdock, bought that property. And Murdock owns Dole Pineapple, among other things. And he built a research community in Kannapolis, and there's 50,000 people that are engaged in his research. And they've all agreed that they will participate in research projects. So we're going to track their clinical health, we're tracking their genomic information, we're tracking what they do, and we're going to use a subset of that group as the target for what we're doing. We've been down and talked to them. It's really interesting. I met an 89-year-old woman who just run a marathon, and she runs typically 15 miles a day. 89 years old. I didn't think I wanted to mess around with her. That's pretty impressive, I thought. But I thought it was, so we're picking 750 people out of that group that we'll study over the next 5 years as part of the aging. We took data from them, and so there's 62% of them have hypertension, 40% osteoarthritis. I was surprised to see a southern community, farm community, with only 29% obese, 22% with diabetes, and 20% of coronary artery disease. I thought those figures were hard to believe, but that's what the doctors have on the charts. So I was very impressed with that too. And there's 1,482 people in the study that we were to pull those diagnoses. So what this is all about are three things. One is the person, me and you. Two is the clinical part of this. And what we've done is engage the clinical communities of geriatricians with different clinical specialties of understanding the fact that you probably will get a disease, a chronic disease, but you'll live a long time with that, longer than you used to. You used to get a disease and you die. Now we keep you alive for a longer period of time. It costs money, but it impacts you. So how do you guarantee the best quality of life given the fact that the statistics are that people over age 65 typically will have 3 chronic diseases, with obesity being considered a disease as part of it. But 3 chronic diseases is on the average the number of diseases that you have too. And in the technical community, in that technical community I'll talk about, but the idea here is to change the model for success. So the hypothesis, and I'm not going to read it, I'll leave it up there for a few minutes that you can do this. But what has to happen, you know, if you expect you're going to live that long, then you're going to worry about what are you going to do financially. And, you know, what are you going to do if you need some assistance in terms of doing it? Particularly if you are interested in having a higher quality of life. So this is the model that we are pursuing. So the individual, and we think involvement with the community is critical. I always say what we want to have is the task of the day. We want you to get up every morning with something to do, because if you don't have something you got to do today, then why get up? So we think that's very important of having a plan, and part of what we're trying to do, working with the community, is to have something to do. Then the caregiver is the relationship you have with your doctor or nurse. And it's important to understand that's changing as well. So again, we're pushing towards some independence of that. So we want to worry about engagement, motivation, attitude, and activity. We think those are essential for high quality of life and for living. Technology to manage this, self-care, social engagement. And with the technology, we're going to propose some remote monitoring. I'll talk to you about that. I'm interested in seeing what your reaction is to some of the things that we're proposing to do. And then a medical home. A medical home is what I thought I had when I was young and innocent, and had a doctor who would come to my house and take care of me. Medical home means this doctor or group of doctors or facility has total responsibility for you. If you go to a specialist, whatever that specialist does comes back to the medical home. They're the ones that worry about it. We found many evidences of people diagnosed with a disease, but nobody worried about the treatment of that. So you were assuming somebody else picks it up. So the whole medical home is coming back again as that this is an individual doctor that is responsible for me, period, my health care. And we're modifying that by changing your role and your responsibility in terms of what's happening. So in community involvement, we're talking about family and support groups. And if your family is in California, there's probably a family nearby, and somehow we want to create and strengthen those family relationships. And the church's role, I think, is helping to create those kind of relationships. And I noticed we had a lot of young kids here, but they all abandoned the older people here too. But forming those relationships is important. If you don't have your family near, adopt a family and vice versa. I think that's very much what you're doing. Share a skill. How many people here have a hobby? Okay. And when you're working, you don't really ever have time to pursue that hobby. I find it amazing when people sort of retire, that play the piano, that play guitar, that write music, that write stories. I mean, all the different kind of things that people do. And I used to say whittle, but I guess you can't whittle anymore because you can't bring a knife in the school. But I always thought that was, you know, somebody told me how to make a whistle and all sorts of little things when I was a kid in grammar school. But whatever it is, give that time to the community. When you get to be 65 is a perfect time for starting that. Engage with the community group. give something to them, and the community will give back, and that's important in terms of what we're doing. So I talked about the task of the day. And then community group activities, singing, play games with kids, dance. Dance actually is probably the best form of exercise that you can get, because if you think about it, you've got to listen to music. Even with my hearing aids, I have to listen to music. I pick up the beat of the music, translate that into a particular dance, translate that in the kind of steps that I need to do, tell my muscles to make those kinds of steps. And if you look at a scan of the brain for an individual that's dancing, it's the whole brain is lit up. When you're reading a book, part of the brain, but it's probably one of the best forms of exercise that you can get. And there are lots of studies that it has some impact on people with Alzheimer's. Now they're beginning to think that dancing, if you start teaching people to dance early Alzheimer's, you are able to delay the onset. In Parkinson's, people that have Parkinson's and dance stop their shakes, and that lasts about an hour after they finish dancing. So there's a great involvement here, and that's the use of your brain. So I think that's important. And you know, when we were in Kannapolis, they had more dancing than we do at Fred Astaire's. I was amazed. They have a community dance every night. And there was a 92-year-old guy there that was one of the best swingers on the dance floor. I was really surprised at the engagement. It's social, it's partnership, and it's the good exercise that we really are talking about. So maybe we should do a little of that in a Duke Memorial for our community, young and old. And doing it together would be fun to do itself. And then community co-ops, grocery shopping, spouse sitting. If you got a spouse that's confined to the house, then other people will come and babysit and then let you go free, and then you do that in terms too. So it's instead of babysitting, it's the partnership. By the way, one of the things that everybody, the thing that this community that we did the focus group interview with was most afraid of is losing their license. And I can understand that. Even though in some cases they had family that would pick them up and take them wherever they wanted to go, you never want to impose. It's an extra step that you've got to do in communicating the time. And with Kay's death, I'm learning one thing. It's all the things that Kay did that I didn't have to do. Picking up the laundry, picking up the mail. I take my car to the car place to get it oil change or whatever, and now it's a big deal because I got to worry about transportation back to work, then come and get me, take me back again. Could impose on the kids to do it, but that's the kind of thing, the mobility. And with my own mom, I thought that was one of the things that was the most difficult for her to do, was to give up the car. And I can understand that. So I think you need to have some roads that for old people only, with two things coming down the side, and that's. I don't know. We're getting there. Now so how many people here are on Facebook? All right. Some people are more honest than others. Facebook is rather interesting, and I just had a friend who came up and said to me, I just checked your Facebook page, and I says, I'm not responsible for anything on my Facebook page, and somebody else posts pictures all the time on my Facebook, and so you don't need to go look at my Facebook page at all. Twitter. Does anybody tweet? A few people, yeah. I'm increasing my tweeting, though. I actually now make speeches, and I'll see people in the audience tweeting comments that I make. I was in New Zealand, they were tweeting like mad on the comments that I was making. Kind of neat. Skype for keeping up with your grandkids. And that's one thing. So how many Skype? Yeah. Okay, same as, yeah. But these are, we do it around the world now. And so when on my trips, I used to keep in touch with Kay when she wasn't with me, but that was rare. But with my kids, it's free. And all of the people in our focus group interviews, one had smartphones, 40 people, two groups of 20 each. They all had computers, And they were all on Facebook. And they used Skype with their kids. And I says, well, we don't, but this was a self-selected group, because we asked for volunteers to come talk to us. So this is not the norm, I think. And so we recognize the fact that we need to do that too. A video cam to share morning coffee. On the cold days, you sit in front of your television with a video cam, and your neighbor has a video cam, and you sit there and chat back and forth with each other, drinking your coffee without having to leave your home and go outside. I think that works just as well. And then, you know, the we too are doing exercise now. Increasingly, that's becoming an activity for older people. So it enhances your ability to play sports. You can ski, play tennis, basketball, any of that sort of thing, and that's part of that too. And then chat rooms for people like me. And again, this is interesting because now we're touching on invasion of privacy. And one of the things that some of my colleagues are doing are scanning Facebook to pick up health information. We think that it would be a way, for example, of picking up an epidemic, of picking up, you know, the beginning of a flu or some other kind of thing. But it also means it's an invasion of your privacy. And I'll talk just a little bit about that because that gets pretty touchy in terms of what we're proposing to do. Virtual travel. One of my favorite things is virtual reality, and we've got several projects now that are proposed based on virtual reality. Who doesn't know what virtual reality is? Okay, everybody does. So, what's your definition? Well, virtual reality is the fact that you create pictures that have animation and movement and that lets you go see things. And what we're proposing for the over 65, that they take trips. If you're over 65, you're no longer quite as eager to go flying around the world. And it also is expensive. And so what you are able to do is to get your neighbors to go with you, and you can go to Paris and see the Louvre or Washington National Gallery or any place you want to go. It's amazing what really has happened. If you watch television, you find it difficult sometimes to understand the difference between reality and virtual reality. And I teach a course that I use in virtual reality. I can't remember my slide sequence here, but I have an avatar. The first time I created an avatar of me for teaching my course, it was young and almost as good looking as me. And then the students came for face-to-face, and they had no idea who I was. So then I decided to be me. So I made an avatar that was a little bit older. And then I just looked at my hair. My hair is white, not gray. And the people that created the art for this didn't have white. They only had gray hair. So I called and I said, you got to put some white hair up there. So my avatar now has white hair. But the students come in and they can now recognize me. And you can meet with your friends. So if you're traveling and you have an avatar of you, and one of the things that I've proposed is that we create an avatar of you to do virtual reality, to do the traveling and everything else too. The privacy folk at Duke are giving me a hard time because they think that's an invasion of privacy. What do you think? Everything's an invasion of privacy. I agree with you. But I think this ought to be okay. I think I'd much rather go with my neighbors when I recognize who they are and they recognize who I am. And what's amazing is how quickly the avatar becomes them. It starts out sort of being it, and then it becomes to be me. And so what's happened to the avatar, that's why I think there's really important value in having an avatar that looks like you. And we're proposing, again, I've got trouble with the IRB for giving me permission to do this, but we are proposing to use virtual reality to combat depression in older people. And what I'm doing is asking, what's the happiest time in your life? Tell me what's going on. And if you have photographs, we'll make avatars and developing a program that will let us script it. And then it'll create the images for you, and you can go back to that period. Now, whether that's going to be good or bad, I think we have to be very careful in dealing with this. And but I do think
How are you defining an avatar? What is that?
it's a creature, an animated creature. It's like a cartoon character, but it looks like you. I actually take a digital picture of the face and put it on the avatar. And you could recognize it. I mean, if you got a room of 10 or so people, and they had their digital pictures on the avatar, then they would look like you. So I think that's the kind of thing, that really is. You can learn a language. One of the things about the virtual reality, because there are some weird virtual reality, one called Second Life, it's fairly famous. But you can hear all languages. You can get it. I think almost every language that somebody speaks, you'll hear it on there, and you can use it for teaching language too. You can learn about your disease. You can learn about clinical trials in which we will do a virtual reality that'll show you what will happen to you if you participate in a clinical trial. So lots of ways of doing that too. But learn about good behavior. Virtual reality is using to help people stop smoking, help them to lose weight, and other things of that nature. Now, who knows who is Watson? Watson that competed against the humans on Jeopardy. So this is actually a picture. I visited Yorktown Heights in New York, and this is the real scene of where that Jeopardy was broadcast from there. And the computer ended up being smarter, knew the answers better. I hesitate to use the word smarter, but the computer was able to answer questions and beat the two best players in the history of Jeopardy. The computer won. And they're trying to move that now into healthcare. But one of the projects that we've proposed to do is to have an avatar that looks like Marcus Welby. So we interviewed a bunch of people, and we said, tell me what the doctor should look like that you would have the most trust and faith in, and Marcus Welby was the answer to that. So we're trying to get permission from whoever owns that image to let us use that for the avatar. But we're trying to create a set of questions. And again, this is what Kay taught me. Kay found out she had an elevated alkaline phosphatase. She hadn't the faintest idea what that meant. And we asked somebody, what does that mean? It says, well, the cancer has metastasized to the bone in your arm. And that still wasn't helpful to Kay. Kay wanted to know if she could go to Curves. But she probably would never ask that to a doctor, and I'm not sure what the doctor would say if she asked that question. But that's the kind of thing that we would like to do. It's the kind of questions that you would like to know that you probably would never ask your doctor, but it's important to you. So telling you a lab test is abnormal, and even telling you what's causing it to be abnormal isn't what you want to know. What you want to know is, how will this impact me in my day life and what I want to do? And that's what we were trying to do with this. And we've been turned down once, but we haven't given up on this. Somebody said, what makes you think that you can do this when IBM took a team of 50 people, 90 people, 5 years to do this? And I wrote back and said, I'm not IBM. So, but they still didn't fund me. But I think that would be fun to do, and that's one of the things that we're proposing to do. So aging is a process, and the clinicians help us understand this, the geriatricians. But I've been curious now: do I age gradually, or do I age overnight? Do I get up one morning and I can't do what I did before? Do I recognize aging? And I have talked to a lot of people about this. I've been interested in this topic for a long period of time. How do I age? Is aging a catastrophic event? Shake some heads so I can get some idea how people react to this. So it's gradual. So how do you know when you are aged? Looking for words. Well, I want to get a facelift. I can't do anything with my hair, but... No, but people do that. Does that reduce aging? Well, I think I'm a lot more distinguished looking now. And my hair's always done this, so even when I was a kid. So, but that's an important kind of thing, I think, to consider, is how do you know that? Aging ends with death. Even Methuselah died. And so I think, aging, death is a word we are afraid to talk about, unfortunately. but yet it's a natural ending to life. And what we want to do is to enjoy life to the maximum, and whenever that happens. And I think that's part of what really needs to be changed, and in older groups. And I know the ministry addresses this topic. It almost needs to be a conversation among ourselves of understanding that that's a process, and it's not something to be afraid of. It's something that's natural and is going to happen. And again, it's part of that is enjoying life up to that particular point. And that was something that Kay and I had difficulty dealing with, because it was really the last moment that we were able to really discuss the significance of what was happening. So, how do you know when you're getting old? Well, you know these lists when it says year of birth, and now, man, I have got to go to the bottom of the list. I know I'm getting old. I'm afraid it's going to go off the bottom of the list, and then I don't know what I'm going to do. Almost all of the latest is up at the top, as if they think the world is young, and you got to go down. Just before I came over here, I was filling out something and looked at it, and I went way, 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 way down, and there weren't many below me, so that was part of what I'm doing. When your dressing table doesn't have any room, it's all filled with pill bottles, then you know you're getting old. The first indication that I had is the fact that I'm stumping my toes on rugs. And I really think the first thing that happens to you getting old, I think your legs get a little bit of fatigue. And so I don't pick my legs up as high when I'm walking now, and all of a sudden I'm catching my toe on the rugs. And I've talked to other people and felt this with other people. One of the things that we do then in some of the older people is say, take the rugs out. The flow rugs out, and then you worry about the dark corners, the sharp corners, no dollies to collect dust. All those sorts of things are part of what they're talking about too. Your arms aren't long enough to read. I now teaching my feet, put the book on your feet so you can see them to read. Or otherwise you carry your glasses. But you got to have a dozen pair of reading glasses, because one's not enough. And it really gets embarrassing to me when a young woman will stand up and give me her seat. Then you know you're getting old when that happens to you. I just sit down and tell her to sit in my lap, and that works out okay. So, but even old people sometimes, the worst, I have to tell you this story. This is a true story. One of the people I was talking to, I said, in 1967, I started my academic career at Duke. I was a faculty member in 1967. And she says, my mother was 7 years old in 1967, and I thought that was even worse. She said, I wasn't born. I mean, that was really the blow to the chest for that too. So they hold the door open for me. And then I sit there and wait. I says, I'm a Southern gentleman. There's no way I can go through the door before you. So we believe that self-care is not only affordable, but it is what enhances a healthy, independent living process. Self-care is what we're trying to sell. I become responsible for my health, and the professional provider is only a service component in my health and in taking care of myself. The process provides the confidence of professional backup. I understand the consequences of my actions, and I provide my own motivations. So self-care is what we are proposing as a solution to the baby boomers in terms of where we're going. So what we're proposing to do is remote monitoring. We're going to measure vital signs and other kinds of things. In a personal area network, we'll analyze the data, and as long as everything's okay, we either feed back information to you in your home, or we'll send it to your medical home, who will then know whenever they should interact with you. So it's like self-care with somebody looking over your shoulder. And we're proposing video cameras and some of the things that we're talking about doing. So here are the things that we know how to measure remotely. Now, how would you feel with with monitors that are monitoring you periodically. Who would have a problem with that? Is that an invasion of privacy? What if I measured how often you went to the bathroom? Mine would be continuous, but other than that. But the people that we did in the focus group interview, they're not against this. We're quite willing, and it's interesting because we can actually measure on the meter of electricity going into your home and tell what switch you're turning on, what room you're in. So we can track you through your house. But that's if you were to fall. I mean, that's what my kids worry about. If I fall and then nobody's there, I mean, who would know unless I were capable of, and you know, they got all these panic devices, but if you fall and land on your device, or if it goes flying across the room, the number of times where something happens that keeps you from pushing that button is enough to worry about it. And so this is some way of doing that. In fact, in Finland, they put strips on the floor. They can tell if you fall down and lie down. We are talking about using, in some cases, video monitors in which we look for movement or sensors or something of that nature. So clearly it is an invasion of the privacy of your home. Is the reward for doing that enough that you're willing to put up with that? And so far the people have told us, yes, not a problem. So this is just a little bit of the picture of what we're working on, of all the different sensors, and then putting those into a computer and analyzing them and making decisions based on that. Now, one of the things that we're talking about doing is every morning when you get up, we want to ask you, what's your mood today? How do you feel today? Great, glad to be alive, I'm ready to go conquer the world, or, oh, not another day. And I think that's very important. Are you in pain? Pain management is a huge issue for older people. How can you put up with that much pain? What do you do about it? And I will tell you, I'm not really sure that the narcotics that I got, I can't conceive how anybody would voluntarily take some of these prescription drugs. Because my nightmares were the worst thing that ever happened to me. And boy, I got off of this. The pain was better than some of the nightmares that I was getting with that too. But fatigue, you know, and this is the kind of thing that we're giving you, and you punch the button. And we can make these as big as you want them to. We're looking at devices now in which those are large enough that you can punch them out and not really move. So the challenges are economic, social, political, working and living conditions, the environment, education, and then access. So one of the difficulties of getting old is adjusting to what nature lets me do. I can no longer go play some sports like I played when I was 16. I used to say I played better when I was 16. But you have to recognize you can't do what you used to do and not get depressed. It's adjusting to what's happening to you as part of aging. And I would say to you, nutrition, by the way, cut that slide out, I wish I hadn't. But nutrition is extremely important. And your nutritional requirements change as you age. And so we have nutritionists working with us, and we'll let you pick foods you like. We will create menus for you and create a shopping list based on those menus. And if you need to, we'll get somebody to go to the grocery store and bring you the groceries. Now, if you want to do it yourself, yeah. I like that. I like that. You can do virtual shopping. We've got a scene. No, I mean, well, see, this is one of the things that I have to do now. So all of a sudden, my Saturday mornings are going to the grocery store, and then I buy all this food, and then I forget I got this food, and then so I have two routines. One is throw food out of the refrigerator, and two is go to the grocery store and buy some more food. That's it. Maybe I can get the computer to help some of that too. But I think that's an important part of this, and understanding what those requirements are. And I will tell you that I cook every night that I am at home, a real meal, and I have pictures to prove it. So aging is a process that has limits, so accept the limits. Enjoy the level of life as it is for me. And I think that's an important part of it too. Avoid depression. Depression in older people are one of the most difficult problems to deal with. And I understand that too. I think I was depressed a little bit after my little episode, trying to figure out whether I want to go back to Duke or not, or just sit home and retire. And thank goodness I didn't. How can technology accomplish some of these goals? So who pays for it? So we're trying to get Medicare, CMS, Center for Medicare and Medicaid, to pay for the monitoring in the home, because we think this will be, first of all, less expensive than these people going in to the doctor's office. Plus, the doctor's office can't handle that kind of volume, so that's part of what we were arguing about. And let me go back to my last. I think I got my last slide. Let me see what I'm doing. So that's who pays. So how do you want to age? Your beard and your sugar. So this is what I say today. So this is at age 65. At age 65, I'm doing scuba dive at the Great Barrier Reef. At age 68, I did tandem hang gliding off of Rio above Ipanema. At age 70, I did a parachute jump tandem at Pinehurst. And then at age 76, I won the U.S. Senior Championship dancing. So you can do what you put your mind to doing. And next year, I hope I'm going to do Kilimanjaro. So we'll see what happens. But again, it's important to remember what I said about accepting what you can do with your age. Yeah. I think you get a little bit of both, because those cliff changes probably had something leading up to them, which is why we want to monitor some of the clinical conditions, and we're working with the clinicians who really, I went to the group of clinical geriatrics people and I said, I really want to know is how to detect when something is happening and what to do for interventions. And they really don't know, and part of what we're trying to do is to keep track. Certainly activity was the number one thing they wanted me to measure was activity. I didn't talk about falls. And falls are extremely important to worry about. And one of the things that we have a group that's working on is how do you sense that somebody's reaching that stage of where they're likely to have a fall, and particularly, is there a right way of falling? I mean, and again with Kay, what I said, if you feel like you're going to fall, sit. And she was on some steps, and started to fall, and she just sat down, embarrassed, but didn't get hurt. So I think those are factors. But their group in Ireland, that's one of the places that we went that are really working with people falling. And there may be, whether you put your weight on your foot, so maybe all we have to do is to put sensors on a rug, and so when you step down, we can see whether your weight is balanced or how it is, and doing that. So I think there are some indicators that you may be able to see the gradual. We don't know that necessarily, and that's why we're doing some research. We're actually working with two other groups. We work with North Carolina State at Murdock, who are doing a lot of work on muscle fatigue. And they're finding out that certain minerals that aren't in older people's diet will solve some of that problem. It won't eliminate it, but it keeps it more, your muscles a little bit stronger, less fatigued with doing certain things. And we're working with University of North Carolina on nutrition in terms of the diets, and we're trying to use the virtual reality and shopping to be able to do that. For example, for diabetics, we're trying to, if you go to the virtual grocery store and pull out something that's not good for you because you're diabetic, it will say, no, take this one next door to that too. So, and these are all projects that are currently.
diminish the dosage. And so that was very hard to track.
Well, and again, part of that is the reason that they make composite pills is to reduce the number of pills. My mother had somewhere around 12 to 15 pills that she took. And she had this scheme. If she felt this way, she took a brown pill, and she felt this way, she took a pink pill. And the doctor never knew the difference about what pill, what medicine she was taking. The doctors are now becoming increasingly aware that everything they prescribe isn't taken. And so, again, if you give me, if you ask me to take a medicine once a day, odds are I'll hit it 95% of the time. If you ask me to take a pill 4 times a day, odds are I'll miss it 2 or 3 times a week. So all of those are factors that come into play. But it's interesting, the focus group we interview, because one of the things that they're doing now is sending you a text message that said it's time to take your meds. But the people weren't really interested in that. Said, I have no problem taking my med. One says, I have a snack before I go to bed, and I've got my pill bottle sitting there where I take my snack, and I see my pills and take my pills. Another person says, I put something that I know I'm going to do at the time I'm supposed to take my pill. And of course, we all use those little boxes, I guess, and putting the pills in them. But that's a problem. So, other questions, comments? Yeah. I'll get you next. But you, yeah.
When you read literature about the decline of the Methodist Church, or any mainline denominations, one of the statistics they always cite as an indication of the decline of the church is that the average age of the United Methodist is 54 years old and getting higher. Or they talk about the graying of the church. And it only occurred to me a couple weeks ago that, one, that could be really insulting to assume that the church is declining because the people are older. I mean, I think it's an indication that, a way of saying the church is not reaching young people. But I was just trying to imagine what against that statistic, if you saw, I mean, there are lots of, especially rural congregations that have no young people, but what would a thriving older congregation look like? What would it be doing? Even if it didn't have children at the children's service and everyone had, with all the farm kids that moved to the cities, and it was just an elderly congregation or a senior congregation or a mature congregation or whatever, what would it look like if it were not declining thriving?
Well, I think, again, just pick up on some of the points I talked about. One would be activities, be things to do that make you feel like life is worthwhile. So I'm engaged in activities. A second is companionship. I think one of the big problems of getting old is the loss of companionship. And I've felt this strongly in the absence of Kay. I mean, the worst thing I can do is eat by myself in a restaurant. And I think there are a lot of things that make it, that companionship can solve that. But the church has got to set the stage of where there is purpose and use of the over 65 generation. Avoid the word old.
I mean, was it a bad idea when we bought the folding machine in the office? So the folks from Crosdale who came in every week on Thursday, they got together, they had purpose, they had a task to do. They were suddenly unemployed from a task that we needed in the church because we got a machine to take the job. Was that, in terms of your research, was that
that would be a negative. On the other hand, it would be a positive if you found something else for them to do. But you hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what I thrive in church, because you're engaging the people. For a little bit of time, I mean, when I retired at once upon a time, and I had not the motivations that I have now. I love the fact that I'm always behind. I've always got something to do. I'm trying to get a paper done or or something like that. No, but you've got to have a reason. And I grew up in a cotton mill, and I always said you got to be 65, locked on your porch for 2 years and die. And I really think that's biased my thinking now, that there's got to be a purpose for living and got to be fun out of living. And my goodness, if you've got a potential of 25 to 40 years, we need to have engagement in doing this. So even if we create projects, back in the good old days, we made quilts in the church, other things of that nature. So I think that's the kind of activities that I think it'll take a little bit of time to convince people that this is real. But that's a good population. But again, I think, one of the things that we do in the communities we go to is engage the church. It's a great way to educate. It's a great way to reach the people. And I think the church has an interesting role to play as part of the aging process to make it fun. So that's a good question. Yes, sir.
Ed, thank you. It's good to see you upright.
It's good to be upright, I can assure you.
I was interested in your graph that sort of argued what we want is to have 100% quality of life and then suddenly, you know, die without thinking so that there's no absolute decline.
Yes.
I guess I want to challenge that. And I remember a line from Flannery O'Connor, who suffered with lupus for many years and finally took her life. And she said, "I feel sorry for anyone who does not experience a period of suffering before they die, because they miss one of God's blessings." And by that, I think she means that when we're healthy, young, we feel immortal. We live in the illusion that we're not walking in the valley of the shadow of death. Whereas when we get older and are confronted with our breakdown, we're confronted with our, as Paul said, the outer man is wasting away. And so I guess I'd be interested in hearing you reflect how the experience of the aging process in its negative can serve as, a part of our spiritual growth as we await death and then cling to the hope of resurrection.
Well, I think you can have that spiritual growth without suffering. I think there's some truth in what you're saying, because I must admit, I didn't feel immortal. I felt invincible in some ways. I'd never been in a hospital before this event happened to me. And I guess that probably shook me up more than anything else. It's suddenly the recognition that something can happen to me. Although I must admit, I'm getting back a little more cocky about things again. I haven't gotten out of it. I recognize that. And again, the quality of life is the key here. Because the person you were talking about probably had a pretty good quality of life, because the quality of life doesn't mean you can go out and do everything you did forever. It really means that you can accept where you are, and there's value in life where you are. And so it's not a measure of health or illness, it's a measure of whether you can do the things that are important to you that makes life worthwhile. So I don't think they're necessarily controversial.
So there's a way in which theologically we rethink what it means to have a quality of life.
Yes, exactly. And that's an extremely important part of it. I think that's, and maybe that's what makes some people have a higher quality of life, even though health-wise it's not good, but it's the faith that comes from being a Christian that brings it back up. Yeah. So I talked longer than I thought. That was a 20-minute talk.
Should we take one more question? I know Marge has a question back there.
I saw things repeatedly, the term self-care. And what occurred to me is that, despite the fact that you're advocating that for older people, that's something that we need to address at all ages.
At all ages.
And one of the things that always concerns me is that it is as we are younger that we can adopt the habits that help us to do this kind of thing. And I'm thinking that the behavioral shift that needs to come prior to confronting the fact that I'm 65.
Yeah. And there's no question about that. And behavior modification now has become a key word that we're using in a lot of things too. And I really didn't get into the genetics of what we're doing now, but I think that's going to really change the way health is delivered, and it's got ethical issues. It probably needs some theological involvement, I think, of not only understanding the significance, but what do you do about it? And there are some really dilemmas that are currently being faced. I don't even know 100% how I think about certain things, although I'm a firm believer that knowledge is a gift of God in a sense. And so what we need to do then is it's a challenge to learn how to appropriately deal with this. But if a man finds out that he carries the mutations for breast cancer, and he has 2 young daughters. What do you do about it? When do you tell them? You wait until they grow up to deal with it? And so I don't know what those issues are, but they're issues the church ought to be discussing. I mean, and it's coming. There's no way you're going to stop this. And there's no way you should stop it, because we can do, the number of diseases that we can detect early on is increasing, and the number of diseases that we do something about, and I'm talking about serious disease that would result in the death of a teenager. Genetic information is adequate to be able to fix that. And so we're going to see that change over the next 5 to 10 years. Someone told me if you predict the future, make sure it's at least 5 years in the future, because then everybody forget what you said. Thank you all.
Thank you. So I'm Katie Garman. I'm one of the Mission Committee co-chairs this year. And really, thank you, Ed, so much for sharing your talk with us and your thoughts and insights and your personal reflections on all of this tonight. I think we should give Ed another round of applause, because that was really... And thank you all for coming tonight. This is the last of our dinner and discussion series for the year as part of our listening theme, for our Who is My Neighbor listening theme. I want to make sure to invite all of you at worship this Sunday. We're going to have our wrap up for the year for our mission theme and kind of some reflections on the things that we've learned. A number of you I've seen at a number of these events over the course of the year, and we've learned a lot. So thank you in particular, Ed, for some of the things that I'm still pondering tonight that you taught us, and some ideas, I think, for things we can do moving forward. I love the idea of dancing at Duke Memorial and some things we can do as a community. So thanks for coming tonight. I think we can close in prayer with me for a moment, and then we'll end our evening. Dear God, thank you for this year of listening and learning together. Thank you for the community that we have at Duke Memorial and the many opportunities we have to listen and learn together. Help us move forward as all of us age with grace, with fellowship, and in community together. And thank you for being with us tonight. Amen.